yeah, I have Chase 1, Puka 2. You have to worry a little bit about like Stafford retirement stuff with Puka. That's really the only differentiator to me, though. I think they're both awesome dynasty assets I'd love to have.
Yeah, it's an awesome top 3 for dynasty. It's Ja'Marr Chase though for me. I have Chase ahead of Nacua. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. Theo Gremminger, Dynasty Life. Today joined by Ryan Heath, who's been on Dynasty Life with me so many times now I can't even keep track. Ryan is one of the co-hosts of Dynasty Points. If you're watching this video on the new Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube channel, make sure you're checking out Dynasty Points as well. The great work those guys are putting over there. We're going to do some collaborative efforts on this channel. If you're listening on the podcast, just sit back and enjoy. But I know you completed all of your positional updates. I'm done with quarterback and tight end, running back and wide receiver by the time we're recording this. Probably about a day more, I'll be done with that. If you want access to our full Dynasty rankings, make sure you subscribe to fantasypoints.com. Early bird special, got it all in there. But you're going to get access to all of our positional rankings. You're going to get access to the overall PPR, the overall Superflex, and then our tight end premium rankings as well. Everything should be updated shortly. Make sure you check those out. But Ryan, let's start out. We talked about recency bias. Let's talk about Colston Loveland, an absolute rocket ship to the moon in Dynasty. Tight end 3 overall in Dynasty for me. Where do you have him ranked?
Yeah, he's my tight end 3 overall as well. I think most people are probably going to have him tight end 3 overall. So maybe the more actionable thing is, do you have him closer to the tight end 4 or closer to the tight end 1 and the tight end 2? Like, where are you actually going to take him in a startup? For me, I'm comfortable taking him up to the 2-3 turn. I feel very confident in Colston Loveland. I do think he's a lot closer to the Brock Bowers and the Trey McBrides than he is the Tyler Warrens, the Sam LaPortas, those types of players. And the reason for that is he is just a weapon that you can line up anywhere. In this last playoff game, he was on the outside for 20% of his routes. Like there are plays where it's clearly just we're getting Colston Loveland on a linebacker. That's our entire play and the entire plan. He's been in the slot, in line, like full-time route share, even with Rome Odunze back. He's been over 17 fantasy points per game over his last 5 games. Like, he's just incredible. He is the prospect we thought he was. It took a little bit, which is not uncommon for tight ends. Remember, Trey McBride was absolutely nothing for the first year and a half he was in the league. So, yeah, I think Loveland's an easy top 3 tight end. I feel absolutely great about him.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And I think like people will say maybe you guys are overvaluing the stats from a single playoff game, but you saw it in week 17, you saw it in week 18, where he's starting to have smash weeks continually. And Ryan, I would say the statistic that matters the most to me with Colston Loveland, 15 targets seems like the real breakthrough, where Caleb Williams, Colston Loveland, you can see it next year where when Colston Loveland was first drafted by Chicago, we both really loved the landing spot, but we did say like maybe he's not going to end up being sort of the number 1 target. I would be surprised if he's not the number 1 or number 2 target on the team next year, even with like a Luther Burden ascension. So I'm completely with you. I think you nailed it, where if you're in like a tight end premium superflex startup, he's going to go closer to the Trey McBride, Brock Bowers tight end 2. For me, that's still going to be Trey McBride because of the age discrepancy there, than he would the Tyler Warren or whoever you have at tight end 4. Is Warren your tight end 4 right now in your dynasty rankings?
So Tucker Kraft is actually my tight end 4. And that was how I felt more or less when Kraft was having his earlier season breakout. I think he's just an incredibly dynamic weapon. I think he's even next to Christian Watson. I think he's easily a top 2 target on that Packers team. Their offense actually looked so much better back at that point in time when they could run it through Tucker Kraft. Warren, to me, really, really good player. But even kind of with the Tucker Kraft injury, I am cool with just waiting that out for Kraft. I think we've seen more of him being like a featured option at the NFL level at this point. Warren much more reliant on kind of the play action 12 personnel Daniel Jones offense. Clearly, the numbers really went away after Daniel Jones was injured. Not to say that that won't necessarily come back, but I still will just lean toward Kraft. I know that's not consensus at all, but yeah, what that means is I'm probably going to get a lot of Tucker Kraft and startups this year.
Yeah, and I can see your enthusiasm for Tucker Kraft. I have Tucker Kraft coming in right around tight end 6 or tight end 7 range. For me, I prefer the Warren and Harold Fannin Jr. types because of they're a little bit younger, and I do think like the Tyler Warren thing, the fact that they had to switch up to Phillip Rivers that late in the season, it was scramble mode for that offense. I think when you get the offseason self-scouting and what is our offense going to look like no matter who's behind center, I think Tyler Warren's going to be a massive part of it, and I think he's a big target earner. Fannin Jr. also, we don't know who the quarterback is in Cleveland, but Harold Fannin Jr. is a player that I'm just very enthusiastic about. I think he could be 125 targets next year. Whoever they add at wide receiver, whoever they have at quarterback, Fannin Jr. having the season he had at 21 was special to me. So Kraft is still a very strong asset for me, but I prefer some of those other guys head-to-head. I have a head-to-head question for you. Harold Fannin Jr. or Sam LaPorta, which way are you going with this one?
Yeah, so right now, as things stand, I will lean Sam LaPorta. I have them ranked back-to-back as my tight end 6 and my tight end 7. LaPorta is a more stable asset. He's always going to have that role in the Lions offense. We know it's a good offense, all of that. The infrastructure is great. Fannin and LaPorta averaged essentially the same fantasy points per game this year. So you might say, well, Ryan, why not just take Fannin then? He's 4 years younger. He did this at a younger age. Why are you not more enthusiastic? It's not actually, for me, the quarterback or the receivers or any of the personnel moves that they make. To me, it's who they bring in at head coach, who they bring in at OC. Because Harold Fannin, while he is a really awesome player, and I very much enjoyed what the Browns did with him this year, it was a very tight end centric offense where they were very willing to say, okay, Harold Fannin, like you can line up at fullback, you can line up everywhere, even as a kind of on the lighter side type of tight end that isn't necessarily helping us much in the running game. We're just going to feature you as an offensive weapon. I don't know that I trust every offensive coordinator to do that. I don't think that that's going to be, for example, if like a Clint Kubiak were to become the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, that's concerning to me. Like that Kubiak is like, oh, AJ Barner, you can block. You're the one that's going to play an 80% snap share, right? So I think it's very dependent on the OC and or the head coach. If Cliff Kingsbury became the head coach of the Browns, then I would put Fannin potentially over Tyler Warren. So it's going to be very dependent on what happens there for me. Right now, I'm kind of hedging. I would have him a little below LaPorta. But yeah, it's stable asset versus a more like volatile high upside asset is maybe the more actionable take there. I think they should and probably will go in the same round of startups.
So for me, when we get past tight end 7, it's a little bit more difficult to rank the guys. I feel like the top 7 for me was pretty clear. We both came up with Oronde Gadsden at tight end 8 overall in our rankings. He's a player that the market has cooled on significantly. Late season production went down significantly from his peak dynasty value, where guys were trading him for like future firsts, snap accepting like potentially even high first round picks for him. I think 8 is about the top of the market right now. Quick thoughts on Oronde Gadsden. Was ranking him at 8 like a clear ranking for you, or was it one you struggled with?
Him and Dalton Kincaid, I have back-to-back at 8 and 9. Those two were pretty close, and I had to give it some thought. I could go either way there. I was pretty impressed by what we saw from Gadsden in kind of like the month of Oronde Gadsden, like the month, yes. I guess the month of October, November.
He looked generational in October. I think if we would have done this exercise then, we would have had him at like tight end 3. I mean, clearly we would have been maybe tight end 3 or tight end 4. Now we're talking about, should we keep him inside the top 8?
Yeah, but so even at the time, there were 1 or 2 games that he left early that are going to reduce his overall like per game averages in that span. There was the Chargers offensive line just completely falling apart, which made him have to stay in and block more, bring him off the field. Like the entire like infrastructure of the Chargers offense just kind of melted away in the second half of the season, as we just saw in that playoff game. So yeah, to me, I like at the time, like kind of put a note for myself, like just forgive anything you see from Gadsden and the Chargers offense from here forward. And that's kind of what I plan to do. That's why I have him at tight end 8. But it's a similar thing with Fannin for me, where I think Gadsden's a really great player. I don't think every offensive coordinator is necessarily going to utilize him to the fullest extent. If the Chargers were to hire Cliff Kingsbury, then great. I could see all the PPR scam targets for Gadsden. Cliff doesn't care that much about being big in the run game or anything like that. Greg Roman, unfortunately, kind of was like the perfect sort of OC for Gadsden, where he will always run a ton of play action to the tight end. It's another one that my opinion could shift a lot higher or a lot lower depending on this NFL coach hiring cycle that we have going on right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you made. And then just a couple of rankings. And again, you're going to get access to John Hanson's positional rankings, Thomas Tipple's dynasty rankings. There's a few others as well. So you can search by Ryan, you can search by my name when you go into the positional rankings, but we're pretty much in line with a lot of our top 14. Just to give you an example, I have Jake Ferguson as tight end 9, Ryan has him as tight end 12. Kyle Pitts I have as tight end 10, Ryan has him as tight end 13. We both have Dalton Kincaid inside our top 11. And then Dallas Goedert, I have at 13, you have at 14. Last guy that makes our 14 is Brenton Strange. Quick thoughts on Terrance Ferguson, who we both steamed up, have him at 15. This year was sort of a lot of Colby Parkinson. It feels like Ferguson's it's coming along. Either it's going to be year 2, it's going to be year 3. That profile, though, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm just willing to take the long view with him. He's very impressive just when you watch him on the screen. I feel like I've been giving a lot of very film bro takes on this podcast.
It's fine. Go for it.
Me.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's kind of what you have to default to with a player like Terrance Ferguson. But zooming out, like this offense that the Rams unveiled this year with all of this extra 12 and 13 personnel, long term, that's amazing for a player like Ferguson. We saw them have success throwing to him at different points through like the second half of the year. Like I think we saw enough flashes to where, yeah, I'm okay ranking Ferguson with the Michael Mayers, with the Isaiah Likeleys, with kind of this just like tier of tight ends where it's like, I don't know when they're going to score points, but I think they're really good players and they could, and I'm going to value that over like sort of like the replacement level veterans, like your TJ Hawkinsons, your Hunter Henrys, like these types of players that are a dime a dozen that can be added to any dynasty roster in like the 15th round of startups. So yeah, I have Ferguson just kind of just above that with the Mayers, with the Likeleys. It's a similar type of bet. I would just, Ferguson is in clearly the best offensive environment of that trio. So he's who I'm going to prefer.
Yeah, Ferguson's definitely an interesting player, and I will add that Kyle Pitts is one of the free agents that we have to circle. This year, he benefited from being like the secondary target in Atlanta. Well, really, Bijan got a lot of targets as well, but the secondary target with a lack of wide receiver 2 there. There's a chance that Pitts lands really, really well. There's also a chance that he lands in some tricky spots, but he certainly regained some dynasty steam. Again, I have Kyle Pitts as tight end 10. Ryan, let's talk about the quarterback spot. I couldn't do it, but I'm seeing some people are doing it. As of today, on Keep Trade Cut, Drake Maye is the QB1 overall. Seems a little aggressive for me. Where are you at?
Yeah, he's my QB3. If I have Drake Maye in any leagues that anyone listening is in with me, I would love to take your Josh Allen or your Lamar Jackson for Drake Maye. And none of this is to be down on Drake Maye. I'm certainly not down on Drake Maye. I think compared to every other quarterback I have ranked below him, It's nice that he has kind of the stability with Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. Like, he's never getting hired away to another head coach position, most likely. Clearly what they're doing is working. They could still stand to add a lot more weapons to the offense, but yeah, he's still over 21 fantasy points per game. He runs enough to where it's clear he's always going to be at least decent for fantasy. So yeah, top 3 dynasty quarterback. I don't know that he has the 24, 25 fantasy point per game upside that a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson does. And that like kind of boosts the two of them over the top for me, just in terms of who I want on my roster, who I'm ranking as a top 2 quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Maye's awesome. I'm not going to be out here and tell you to sell him for anybody other than the Allens or the Lamar Jacksons.
Yeah, I put Drake Maye at QB2. So we both have Josh Allen as the QB1. Doesn't really need much discussion. Josh Allen's 29 years old, but I mean, it's nobody's worried about age with him for now. He's unflappable, and the situation in Buffalo has to be better next year in terms of the skill position talent around him. It just has to, Ryan. I think they're going to take shots at the wide receiver position in multiple ways. Not sure how that's going to shake out, but it has to get better when you look at some of the players that were on the field for Buffalo this week. Drake Maye, though, the situation's also going to get better there. Drake Maye had a new coaching staff, a new coordinator, new players all around him. First year with Stephon Diggs, first year in this offensive system, rookie offensive lineman, and Drake Maye looks fantastic. So I think having Drake Maye inside the top 3 makes a lot of sense. I know some other sites are going to put Drake Maye as the QB1 overall. We won't be doing that at Fantasy Points, but he will be close to it. Josh Allen, probably going to be the QB1 for all of the positional rankers, and I know certainly in our super flex, he's still going to be number 1. Lamar Jackson, I have right behind Drake Maye. I mean, Ryan, losing Todd Monken, I don't like it for Lamar Jackson. Also, the rushing production taking a tick down. And I'll look at like the age discrepancy with Maye and Jackson. I mean, obviously he's the same age as Josh Allen, but Lamar Jackson's QB3, so we're still pretty much in the same range. I'm a little bit higher on Patrick Mahomes than you are. We've both moved Joe Burrow up. Jaden Daniels, we both have the same, so we're pretty much in line. One guy I want to get your opinion on, Trevor Lawrence, who was one of the biggest risers for me from like doing this last year at this time versus today. Where do you have Trevor Lawrence ranked? What's your enthusiasm levels for Trevor Lawrence heading into year 2 with Liam Cohen in this Jacksonville offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty high. I have Lawrence at QB 11, kind of like bringing up the rear of what I see as like a very difficult tier to rank. Like, if you wanted to put Lawrence ahead of a Caleb Williams, ahead of a Justin Herbert, I would be totally okay with that, just based on how he scored over these last 8 weeks of the season. Because we've seen this before in these Liam Cohen offenses. Number one, it's an incredible offense. It has been working very well. It's worked well everywhere that Liam Cohen has gone, outside of the first 8 weeks of Jacksonville this year, where BTJ was miscast, Travis Hunter didn't know the offense, there were all these communication issues. Like, once it kind of clicked and these players got comfortable in their roles, yeah, it was awesome. And Trevor Lawrence was a top fantasy quarterback. We can like argue until we're blue in the face about how good is Trevor Lawrence actually, or how good is Caleb Williams actually, or how good is Brock Purdy actually even. But for all 3 of those guys, it doesn't matter. Like the coaches and the play callers are going nowhere. They are awesome. They will continue to be awesome. And especially for Caleb and for Trevor, the weapons are awesome. So the situation couldn't be better. It doesn't appear like any of that is going to change it in like the projectable near term, 2 to 3 years out. So yeah, I'm happy with all those names I just mentioned as top 12 dynasty quarterbacks. I suspect every single year I'm going to have more Brock Purdy than any of them in terms of who the market allows me to draft the most of in startups. But yeah, I think Trevor easily fits in as a top 11 dynasty QB.
We both have Justin Herbert. Well, we actually have them different. You have Justin Herbert at QB9. I have him at QB10. Lawrence at QB11 for both of us. Is there an argument to putting Lawrence above Herbert at this point, just because of what we know about this offense and the fact that it was Liam Cohen, there's a lot of receivers there that we like in Jacksonville. It just seems like it's a very stable environment. And I think if we go with sort of our priors, it would definitely be Herbert. Or do you think that's a little too reactionary from me?
No, I think it would be entirely fair. What's keeping Herbert up there for me is, number one, he looked like a superstar in the first month or so of the season, when the offensive line wasn't quite as banged up, when they were dropping back more. Like we know that Justin Herbert can be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The offensive line can only get better going into next year, which is the eighth consecutive year we've said this about the Chargers, that they can only get healthier from here. But yeah, it would be totally understandable if you were to want Lawrence over Herbert. Yeah, just because of production. I will take in Dynasty like the longer track record of being a high-end quarterback that Justin Herbert brings to the table. But yeah, if you said, Ryan, who's going to score more fantasy points in 2026, that's like close to a coin flip for me. So I'm totally fine with someone preferring Lawrence.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion. Another two players who have moved up, Cam Ward, who we're both sort of in line on. Let me pull up the Cam Ward one. Cam Ward, we both had at QB 18. And then Tyler Shough, who you have at QB 17, I have at QB 19. I think Cam Ward is pretty self-explanatory for the listeners. He's a number one overall pick last year. Tennessee is going to add players around him. Tennessee has some of the most cap space available to them of any team in the NFL. They also pick at 4 overall. I think they're a team to keep an eye on for free agent wide receivers. And I think 4 overall, if they fall in love with one of these guys in this draft, a Carnell Tate, certainly a Jordan Tyson, then they're either going to maybe take him or maneuver down a few spots and take one of those guys. So I think there's going to be help coming for Cam Ward. But Tyler Shough's an interesting one. Huge riser for us from where we had him last year, where Shough maybe took a little too much heat for where he was selected in the NFL draft. 26 years old. So again, he's a different kind of year 2 quarterback. But Ryan, that profile is extremely fantasy friendly. The Kellen Moore offense, extremely fantasy friendly. And the threat of Taysom Hill taking goal line carries, it should be gone. Taysom Hill's probably going to be gone from New Orleans next year, I would imagine. So your thoughts on Tyler Shough? We're both pretty enthusiastic about him, but are we enthusiastic enough?
Yeah, I was trying very hard to make sure I wasn't like anchoring to the draft capital with Tyler Shough, because this is a player that the Saints seem committed to, at least for 2026. He runs, which is great. And we've seen Kellen Moore run a successful offense with both him and with Spencer Rattler. So I don't even have to take that hard a stance on how good is Tyler Shough actually. I just think that as long as he is starting for Kellen Moore, that this offense is going to be passable. He's going to score fantasy points. And I can't say that about Cam Ward. There's a lot more uncertainty. You feel better about the overall talent profile, I guess, from him being the number 1 overall pick. But I don't know that Cam Ward put up much better tape or much better advanced, certainly not better advanced metrics than Tyler Shough this year. So yeah, I'm going to narrowly prefer Shough. So I have him back to back, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So for me, Shough, all your arguments make sense, but it's really it's an insulation thing where the number 1 overall pick has a lot more insulation. Everything's sort of going well for New Orleans right now. The conversation is positive. If things don't go well next year, though, that 2027 class is loaded. And I think that New Orleans is way more likely to lean into grabbing a 2027 quarterback in the draft if Shough doesn't take this next level. So Shough, I think, is a really, really fun bridge quarterback. Is he more than that? We'll find out soon. I do think he's got QB1 potential next year as a top 12 scorer. But for long-term stranglehold of the starting position, it definitely leans toward for me. I'll make a quick note, Ryan. 2 guys to keep an eye on: Malik Willis, Mac Jones. If you start looking at our rankings, we both have those guys like inside of top 31 QB rankings, where we've got them ahead of a number of guys who started this year. But the marketplace this year is going to be weird because I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that are on the brink that teams might bring in competition that could overtake them. And then you've got you're like lacking quarterbacks in this draft class. So I think Malik Willis is super interesting. I'll just ask you this. We both have Malik Willis at 28 overall. He's going to be a free agent. Let's say he lands somewhere interesting with decent weapons around him, maybe an offensive coordinator you're excited about. How highly could Malik Willis run if he signs with something interesting?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a good fantasy quarterback, most likely, as long as he's on the field. It really depends on the contract. Like, if it's a contract that says he's the starter presumptively for the entire season, unless he's really bad, then I'm probably going to boost him up above like the JJ McCarthy's of the world, honestly, because I think they would have similar value insulation. I think Willis is more likely to score more fantasy points on the field. So yeah, he could like start to scratch the top 25 depending on where he signs for sure. Maybe you could even go more aggressive. Like I have Kyler Murray at 23. If there were a way better landing spot for a Malik Willis, I could bring those two a lot closer.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this one. And I think that the contract that he gets will be interesting. I think that the quarterback competition around him will be interesting. If this is a situation where the team drafts somebody and then also signs Malik Willis and they're like, this is the bridge quarterback, that's different. But if somebody signs him and the backup is underwhelming, then I think Malik Willis could end up earning a starting job for a few years. He's young enough. He is very mobile, and he's an underrated passer. And we saw that spike week against Baltimore this year that helped a lot of superflex managers in all formats. Malik Willis, really an interesting one. So if you can buy low on him before free agency, highly recommend that one. There's just not enough starting spots that Malik Willis, I would bet on him being a starter next year versus being a backup, just based on how many teams need quarterback and sort of this underwhelming 2026 NFL draft class. Ryan, let's talk about it though. Chris Olave, huge riser this year, never really dead and buried, but much like the redraft market, he's going to rise up significantly in the dynasty rankings. He played all 17 games. He caught over 100 passes, and the targets went way, way up. Also, he's the clear offensive focal point for what we believe is an ascending offense in New Orleans, young enough. And Ryan, they might give him another big contract extension this offseason. Your thoughts on Chris Olave? Where is he coming in for you in terms of your rankings?
Yeah, I mean, Olave is a really good player. He has always been towards the top of all the per route metrics that the nerds like me care about. He's a good player on tape, like really good player, not like an ascendant talent that is always going to rise above his surroundings necessarily. But when the surroundings are good, and which they were for most of this year, he's gonna be a really useful like borderline wide receiver one. That's about how I have him ranked in Dynasty. I have him as the wide receiver 13. That's kind of at the end of a tier with Nico Collins, Tedero McMillan, and Garrett Wilson. So that's kind of who I have him around. And all four of those players I would talk about kind of similarly. Maybe T-Mac proves to be more than this, but when the offensive environment is good, all of those players have like high-end wide receiver one upside. When it's not, they do not. It is totally within the range of outcomes for all of those players in any given year to kind of be like very meh, like wide receiver twos. So that's what that tier is. You have to understand that when you're buying into it. You could say, oh, I'm like, why are we buying high on Chris Olave? Like right after he had a good season with a good environment, maybe it goes back down. Maybe it does. But yeah, you can say that for anybody else you're going to rank in this range. There are like 9 wide receivers in Dynasty right now that I feel amazingly rock solid about. And that's kind of like the next tier down below it. So yeah, not to say I'm down on Olave. I definitely think I'm not. I imagine I'm about at consensus or maybe a little above, but that's what you got to understand is these receivers are very environmentally dependent. They are stable assets. They're never going to go to zero. They're always going to be useful players in the league. All of them are young. Like these are like cornerstone build around type of pieces. But they are not necessarily the best like win now pieces if I know I'm trying to push the chips in this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think that, like, I talked about this with Scott Barrett on School of Scott, where I do a top 50 PPR redraft rankings, like an early one. And I have Chris Olave higher than a lot of people. I know that a lot of sites are starting to do this one, Ryan. We did this last year at Fantasy Points. I didn't invent the way too early ranking, but certainly more people are dropping them this year. And I had Chris Olave like near the 2-3 turn. And Scott just kind of was... It was almost like I'm ranking Chris Olave towards like his peak outcome type season. I do think he's very insulated though, because the wide receiver one in Kellen Moore offenses has printed in terms of ADP value. Like Keenan Allen, we look back at that Los Angeles season a few years ago. Certainly AJ Brown was fantastic there. CeeDee Lamb multiple years. I mean, again, I'm talking about really good wide receivers that he happened to coach. But Chris Olave did see a value increase with Kellen Moore. I think Olave is interesting. I do think if you're talking from a classical, sell high, there's a little bit of sell high to Chris Olave where, like you mentioned, like a Garrett Wilson being ranked behind him, being in line with a Tedero McMillan, if you can get sort of anything plus, and some people will laugh that off and say, hey, yo, Theo, you're not going to get any of those guys plus for Chris Olave. Not sure. I think he's a eye of the beholder guy for a lot of dynasty managers, especially with those counting stats. Talk about a couple of guys who need to come down in the dynasty rankings, but just how low did they go for you? Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. Last year at this time, I mean, Ryan, it's a tale of two cities. Where are you at with these two guys? Who are you more concerned about of the two? And just where do they come up in your wide receiver rankings?
So I'm more concerned about Brian Thomas Jr. because I think we have seen that the ideal version of this Jaguars offense is with BTJ kind of in this outside field stretcher role that is not that great for fantasy. In these Liam Cohen offenses, you want to be the Parker Washington. You want to be in the slot. You want the high volume targets. That's not what BTJ is getting. They tried him in that early in the year. He couldn't run over the intermediate areas of the field or over the middle of the field. And yeah, we got the result we did. So so long as he remains on the Jaguars, he seems stuck in this kind of not great for fantasy role. I do think there's a real chance that they trade him. This is a front office that has shown to be trigger happy and willing to make moves. If they are very committed to wanting to play Travis Hunter two ways, it would make some sense to me for them to trade Brian Thomas Jr. to kind of open up that space, because Jakobi Meyers, Parker Washington both seem very locked into their roles currently. But outside of that happening, yeah, it just makes Thomas really hard to rank. I have him as the dynasty wide receiver 22. For redraft, I would have him ranked much lower than that, which is really sure. Weird. It's really hard with these Jaguars receivers. I have them in dynasty ordered Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter, Parker Washington, Jakobi Meyers. For redraft, if the roster were what it were, I would rank Parker Washington the highest for redraft if we'd have fast forwarded to August and had the same exact setup here. So yeah, I think with Thomas, really talented, could definitely succeed somewhere else with a quarterback that like wants to throw outside the numbers, is willing to kind of force the ball to one receiver. He's an explosive player, all of that. So I'm never going to like bury him that hard, but yeah, he's someone you have to understand what you're doing when you're drafting him. Way more of like a rebuilding type of piece for sure. Ladd McConkey, to me, I am probably going to be a little bit above consensus, but I'm still going to be pretty price sensitive to him. He's my wide receiver 15 right now. A lot of this is kind of what we talked about with Oronde Gadsden, where I'm going to be very willing to excuse any of the efficiency stuff from the Chargers in the second half of the year with the offensive line doing what it did. We have a full season of McConkey, like essentially just alphaing Quentin Johnston in his rookie season. That wasn't as consistent this last year, but yeah, I'm very open-minded to whoever the Chargers bring in at OC. I think McConkey is clearly the best down to down player in terms of winning on his routes. He should be like the perfect PPR scam kind of archetype player that can also get over the top. So I still like Ladd. I still think he's a really good player. I don't think he's like going anywhere in the NFL. So I have him more towards like the top of that kind of difficult tier of receivers. So yeah, McConkey at the top of that tier, Brian Thomas Jr. towards the bottom of that tier. But I think the more actionable thing is I think I'm gonna be avoiding that tier a lot in startups. Once you get past like the Chris Olaves, there are like 8 or 10 receivers that are just very, very volatile. Your Ladd McConkeys, your Luther Burdens, who I think some people are going to like even more than that. Like your AJ Browns, your Brian Thomas Jr.'s. Like these are very like mercurial profiles that I'm going to not. I think on average, what you're getting there is not going to be, the production at least is not going to be worth the cost compared to waiting several rounds and drafting a lot of these like Michael Pittman types, Alec Pierce's, even your Christian Watsons, your Terry McLaurin's. Like I think that kind of like exciting tier, mercurial tier of receivers is not going to be the place to get fantasy points in a cost efficient manner this year in startups.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take, and we're going to do some cool stuff with Dynasty mock startups. Start that strategy very early, right here on Dynasty Life. Make sure you're checking that one out. But Ryan, I'll say I'm a little bit more concerned about Ladd. Ladd's going to come in somewhere in that wide receiver 24, 25 range for me. You bring up sort of the optimism with the new OC, but that huge playoff game, that 15 points per game we saw as a rookie, did come with Greg Roman. So I get it. The grass could get greener with a new OC. The offensive line disaster this year in LA is really the biggest storyline, where the last 3 games of the year, they were dreadful. But McConkey had like 190 total yards in his last 7 games played. It's really ugly stuff. And you factor in Keenan Allen had like 130 targets this year. What if LA brings in another wide receiver, whether through trade, whether through the draft? Maybe we've seen the Ladd McConkey operating as the wide receiver 1. I'm just, I think, a little more pessimistic about the situation. He was also a player that wasn't a perfect prospect, was a 2nd round pick. And I think we propped up because the obviously he's playing with Justin Herbert as the wide receiver 1. But I think that there's a lot more variables, a lot more range of outcomes with McConkey. BTJ, I think he's going to get traded this offseason. It's a hot take. I think everything being equal, Jacksonville, on paper, Jacksonville, let's put this great offense around for Liam Cohen. Let's get things right with BTJ. But it just seems like such an odd fit with Liam Cohen. And Ryan, Jacksonville doesn't have a 1st round pick. If you're San Francisco at the end of that 1st round, are you going to offer a 1st round pick for BTJ? I think maybe that would be the case. If you're the New England Patriots, end of the 1st round, I think that's a trade they would make. Buffalo Bills, there's a bunch of these teams where would a team trade a 1st round pick for BTJ? I think there's going to be a market for that one. And I think they're going to be able to recoup a very high pick, close enough to what they gave up for BTJ. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Let's go rapid fire on this one. Who's the wide receiver 1 overall for you in your updated wide receiver rankings for Dynasty?
Yeah, it's still Ja'Marr Chase for me. I wanted to rank Puka Nacua there, but just you can't really beat the stability of, we know Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins are all locked up long-term with the Bengals. This offense is going to function as it kind of always has, which has always been amazing for fantasy points. So yeah, I have Chase 1, Puka 2. You have to worry a little bit about like Stafford retirement stuff with Puka. That's really the only differentiator to me, though. I think they're both awesome Dynasty assets I'd love to have.
Yeah, it's an awesome top 3 for Dynasty. It's Ja'Marr Chase, though, for me. I have Chase ahead of Nacua in my redraft rankings as well, which might look really silly to some after what we just saw last week with Nacua. But Ja'Marr Chase, we had the wide receiver 1 overall year 2 seasons ago, won the Triple Crown, one of the best target earners we've ever seen, 175 targets in consecutive seasons, Ryan. I love Chase at the 1. JSN comes in at wide receiver 3 for me. Huge riser this year. JSN's completely locked in. I'll give you a tier here. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then the injured Malik Nabers. Throw him in there. Who do you have highest of that group?
Yeah, I have Nabers the highest. I actually have Nabers ahead of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So
Okay.
the reason for that is Kubiak leaving is like pretty big to me for JSN. I think like the best way to see JSN coming was based on like Clint Kubiak efficiency, play action, deep ball stuff. I imagine they bring in somebody similar that's going to run a similar type of offense, but it always has to make you pause and question a little bit. For me, Malik Nabers, much more elite prospect. We have basically only seen him be a massive target dominator anytime he's been on the field. Has the ascending quarterback in Jackson Dart, who I think has like a higher, longer term ceiling as a supporter of fantasy points than somebody like a Sam Darnold. I'm going to prefer Nabers there. And then after that, I would rank it CeeDee Lamb, who I have at 5th overall, and then Justin Jefferson, who I have at 6th among wide receivers. That's pretty fluid. That's very much just based on like current situation. I think they're similarly talented players. I'm going to lean to the player I think will score more fantasy points in 2026.
And a lot of people want to know, where do you have Justin Jefferson ranked?
Yeah, he's at number 6 for me, Justin Jefferson. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, who you also asked about, I have just behind at number 7.
Yeah, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown's an interesting one. Like wide receiver 7 for him, it just feels like such a value where he scores so many points and we never want to steam him up. I want to have access to Amon-Ra St. Brown if that's going to remain the startup value. If there's any sort of difference there, he's just like such a locked-in player that never gets the benefit of the doubt. It was continually the Jefferson, Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown discussion. It might be Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of those two guys this season in terms of scoring once again. So for me, he's super interesting. Wide receiver, it's just a great year, Ryan. There's a ton of value at the top. We got to move on. We got to talk about our guy, De'Von Achane, who the two of us very wisely have been on for years here, singing the praises of what an elite asset he is in redraft, what an elite asset he is in Dynasty. We got it this year, Ryan. You got the 1,300 plus rushing yards. You have the 20 plus points per game. So he crossed 2 big milestones. Got to a 20 point per game season. Was like 17 plus for his first 2 seasons. And then his first 1,000 plus rushing yard performance of his career. And De'Von Achane scores touchdowns at an incredibly high rate, catches passes at an incredibly high rate. But we have a huge variable here. We don't know who the head coach will be in Miami. Mike McDaniel was a net benefit for De'Von Achane 100%. So no matter what you think about Mike McDaniel, the head coach, Mike McDaniel always found a way to print fantasy points, especially when it came to Achane. Where are you putting him now that McDaniel is out of the equation?
Yeah, and it's not just with Achane. It's been with practically every running back that has ever come through Mike McDaniel's hands, right? Has just printed fantasy points. To be clear, I think Achane by himself is an incredibly talented player. I think he's a way better and more physical runner than he gets credit for just because he was a lighter prospect coming out. People kind of have this perception of like, oh, he's a satellite back. Not the case. Like that guy is like a violent runner. I really like him, and I think he kind of took that part of his game to another level this year. The receiving is just amazing. I would put him up there with a lot of receivers in the league in terms of just ability to go on the outside or in the slot and win a route. So he's amazing. I could not possibly have like a higher opinion of De'Von Achane, the player. I just really worry about whoever the next head coach or OC is that comes in. Do they look at De'Von Achane, an undersized running back, and say, yeah, no, you're not going to be like our featured running back? Like, I think that's a legit chance. And so when it comes to kind of like breaking ties here among really good players, for me, that has me rank him below a Jonathan Taylor or an Omarion Hampton right now. My opinion could instantly shift back to having him as solidly the RB4 and having him be a target for me once we find out who the coach is and how much I trust them and how much of a boomer I think they are, frankly. But yeah, that's where I'm at on him right now. Startups are just really, really tough this time of year before we have kind of any idea who is even in any of these coaching seats. It does matter a lot in terms of projecting how players are going to be utilized in the short to medium term.
Yeah, I mean, I think that tier is really interesting, and they're all elite assets. Jonathan Taylor, what a season. And when you combine it with what he was able to do at the tail end of the 2024 season, it's sort of a Jonathan Taylor appreciation offseason. I know Scott Barrett and I talked about him. I have him very solidly inside like the top 8 picks in PPR for next year. And Taylor's right in that 20, he'll be 27 years old, which has been sort of a magic number, that 27-year-old season. You saw it with like Eckler had a huge season there. There's been a bunch of these running backs who've had like their magical season at 27. So Taylor's interesting. For me, though, it's Devon Achane is going to be a big influence on the head coach there, where I think that Achane's just so good, and he's also 24 years old, that I'm maybe a little bit less worried about him. So I think now is actually a time to kick the tires and see about trading for some Devon Achane. He's just such an elite talent, Ryan. I don't need to tell you that. Hampton's an interesting one. I do think Hampton's one where I was way higher on him in terms of PPR rankings than Scott is. Scott has some apprehension about him for next year, about just being too much steam. But Ryan, how can we not get super excited about this profile? The touchdown upside that he has is immense in this offense. And once this offensive line stabilizes, plus with Omarion Hampton, when we take the bird's eye view, really effective as a receiver this year in multiple instances during the year. So that was something where I love Hampton. Your quick thoughts on like Hampton's rookie season. Obviously it was fewer games than you wanted to see, but the sample size included a lot of fantasy friendly profile stuff.
Yeah, I think what we saw from him whenever he was anywhere close to healthy was pretty encouraging. Does seem like he can be this really good like PPR type of compiler back. He was really the only running back that Justin Herbert showed interest in throwing to at any point in the season. So yeah, for all those reasons, like just the uber bell cow types of games that he had, including in week 18 like that. Yeah, I am feeling pretty good about Hampton. I don't think he's as talented as a Devon Achane or a Jonathan Taylor, but yeah, he's young. You have a longer runway with him. And at least in theory, attached to Justin Herbert offensive environment should always be at least decent. So yeah, he's a top 5 dynasty running back for me. Maybe he'll move down to 6 if Achane gets a strong offensive coaching draw.
One player that I think should be talked about more of a potential top 5 dynasty running back, and I know the two of us have been consistently high on him. During the season, we had him at running back 7, running back 8 range. He's going to move up for me. Your thoughts on James Cook? I think you're going to see a big market correction in terms of redraft for him. But Ryan, should we also be taking more of a optimistic approach with him in Dynasty? 26 years old. And he's just been an absolute force for consecutive seasons, and he's done so without big reception totals. I brought this up to Scott, where if you're in the Buffalo Bills front office and you're self-scouting, how do you not get James Cook more work in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, there have been, I forget which year it was. There was a year where James Cook was heavily utilized in the passing game, and he was great. And then the year after, it shifted to we're actually not going to use him in the passing game. We're just going to use him as a very efficient runner. So, yeah, I don't know. The Buffalo the coaching staff has been very bipolar with James Cook. Like start of this year, they were like, yeah, he's just our bell cow. Like he was getting 20 plus touches every single game. At one point, end of September, they were like, yeah, we're going to save him for December. And then they did, and they unleashed him again in December. Yeah, it's very annoying. But on average, I'm at peace with the fact that, yeah, he's just going to score as a top 8 running back most likely every single season, kind of whatever the ups and downs of the workload are. Always been really efficient, attached to Josh Allen. Yeah, he's my dynasty RB7. He's kind of he's like Bucky Irving if we didn't have to worry about the workload as much, and if Irving was always just printing fantasy points kind of regardless of what the workload looked like. Because yeah, they're just interesting players to compare because like in theory, both like incredibly efficient runners. Irving wasn't able to do that as much this year. Once Liam Cohn went away, obviously offensive line issues and everything. So yeah, it's just a better environment for James Cook. I would compare them as players almost, where I think you're gonna get annoyed like with the week to week usage at times, but it's all probably for Cook especially, it's all probably going to average out to he scores a ton of fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Cook significantly ahead of Irving, and again, my running back rankings are not completed, but with Irving, I do think that there's maybe we saw the peak of the market. The touches per game were elite for Bucky Irving. The down the stretch production wasn't there. Ryan, I did read one Tampa Bay beat reporter today writing it. I think it might have been the Pewter Report. And again, we're recording this on Wednesday, but there was a beat reporter talking about Mike McDaniel is still a potential candidate for the OC job in Tampa Bay, which would maybe change our minds on a lot of these Buccaneers guys. But Irving definitely comes down for me. Again, you can read Ryan and my full running back rankings. We're going up to like running back 75 on these. They're extremely deep. We could talk about a ton of guys. I think Cam Scadaboo is certainly interesting. I think Henderson, RJ Harvey, all these guys are pretty interesting. But we're about in line with them. They're all like top 19, top 20 guys. Obviously, there's a bunch of free agents like Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker we could talk about. But every single offseason, Ryan, we end up getting really worried about a couple of players and them potentially being nuked. It doesn't always happen. But who's a player that you're worried about dynasty value-wise at the running back position? Who's giving you a little bit of trepidation? Last year it was Chase Brown, where we thought there was a chance that Cincinnati would draft a running back. Chase Brown ended up being unbelievable this year. Fantasy managers who sold low are kicking themselves. But is there anybody sort of like that this year where you could see the usage being not as good next year and maybe dynasty managers want to consider being very cautious with this asset?
I think the most like obvious answer here is Woody Marks.
Yes.
He kind of just became the Texans RB1 almost by necessity. Like, yes, he was clearly the back they preferred to hand it to for most of the second half of the season. He has never really impressed me in terms of watching him. He hasn't really impressed at all in terms of advanced metrics or anything. There's not really much you can point to in terms of why Woody Marks should continue to have a job. If in the offseason, to me, this is a team that could be looking to add a running back or make a big splash at the position in free agency, or at the very least adding competition in the draft. So yeah, Marks to me, I have him ranked at RB25, which is about as low as I feel I can push like a presumptive starting running back, quote unquote. But I don't think it's all that likely that he sees the type of workload that he did in the second half of the year. He would be my first pick for guy that gets demolished.
Yeah, I mean, Woody Marks, I think he's easily one. I worry a little bit about Jalen Warren with a potential coaching change there. He's already lost a ton of value with Kenneth Gainwell. There's a ton of these guys. There's not really one at the top this year that was like one of the top scorers. I will say I have some apprehension with Kyren Williams because he's absorbed so much volume over the last few years. I mean, the guy just caught a touchdown pass in the playoffs. People get angry when I bring this one up, but year 3 Blake Corum could put a little more pressure on Kyren Williams than maybe we've ever seen during this meteoric run for Kyren. And then, of course, all these free agent guys are interesting, Ryan. Like, Javonte Williams has steamed up in dynasty rankings, and I think he's earned himself a starting job. But if that starting job is not the Dallas Cowboys, there's a chance that the usage is way worse than it was this year. Javonte was like 18 touches a game in that offense. Travis Etienne, we are hoping and hoping and hoping if we have him on our dynasty rosters that he re-signs with Jacksonville and stays in that Liam Cohen offense. If he takes the bag from somebody I think people might get caught up in, oh, it's all good. Travis Etienne's going to get a million touches on XYZ offense. He'll be fine. But that system was so beneficial for him. So tons of guys here. And that's why you got to stick with fantasy points. We're going to talk about all of these offseason subjects. Make sure you're checking out, once again, our Dynasty rankings over at fantasypoints.com. Make sure you're watching Dynasty Points, Ryan's Dynasty Show. Stick with us here at Dynasty Life. We've got everything covered. And we're going to be doing a lot more crossover content. Ryan and myself, also Thomas Tipple, Jacob Sanderson. Make sure you're checking out our new YouTube channel, Fantasy Points Dynasty. And if you're a longtime Dynasty Life listener, that's going to be the YouTube home for Dynasty Life. So make sure you check that one out. Highly recommend all of Ryan's work. One of the sharpest guys out there. And stick with us here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush this entire offseason. We'll see you soon.